across the galaxy. This is where conspiracy on the wild side meets the perspective of a lifetime. This is the Free Zone with your host, Freeman.
Hello and welcome to the Free Zone. Well, does it feel like the end of days to you guys? I mean, when we just look at the news and the movies and the programming going on planet Earth in 2019, it seems pretty clear that the production companies want us to know it's the end of the world. And on top of that, if you're following the news with the massive hailstorms, the fireballs, I mean, coming in at nuclear threat over Australia, tornadoes ripping across the United States, floods, fires, UFOs on the rise, and then this man lights himself on fire at the White House. Meanwhile, SpaceX launches Skynet, or they call it Starlink, but boy, you know, what's the difference as this 5G battle comes in? But this battle has been going on for some time. It is a long and lengthy battle that goes all the way back to the beginning of history. And we have one person on our radar that could absolutely cover this ancient history right up to the modern day, and that is James Perloff. He's a great friend of the show. We've had many wonderful talks, especially his book, Truth is a Lonely Warrior. Highly recommend that because all of us know that is the absolute truth. Truth is a lonely warrior. But here we are, and we're going to get deep into the world today as we look into this rise of the dark hero, anti-science, and the battle for the Bible, utilizing all the means of politics, Hollywood, and everything that James has covered in his new work. It's called 13 Pieces of the Jigsaw, solving political, cultural, and spiritual riddles, past and present. So please welcome to the Free Zone, Mr. James Perloff. Here we go again, James.
Here we go again, and I just enjoy being on your show because you have so many unique insights. In fact, I watched most of your interview with John B. Wells, and it was great to hear your background, you know, how your family had been involved in, you know, Freemasonry, right, and some occult things, and you didn't even know it in your youth. You know, hearing you talk about your prediction of 9/11, and just brought the picture of your history together so well. So I really enjoyed that.
Yeah, I felt like that was the closest I was ever going to get to being on Coast to Coast. Being that me and John B. Wells have both been banned from Coast to Coast, and we got along just well. But, you know, these guys, they never know who I am. Even 14 years, 20 years into this, they still don't know who I am. So he was, you know, he had no idea. So it was a lot of fun. I kind of set up a few props there. Now, as far as I know, John B. Wells and Caravan to Midnight is a members-only program.
Right.
So I don't think anyone, you know, other than the members got to see that. But it was definitely a feather in my cap to finally have a coast-to-coast host have me on. And I wanted to give him a heck of a show. And you saw I was pulling out pictures of my dad with Jimmy Carter on Killer One Submarine and in his Mason garb. And yeah, when you start to realize that the world is much stranger than you think, and then you find it right at your own home, I mean, this is when you really, I mean, Dad chased flying saucers for God's sake, you know, it's it's just, oh my God, you know, here my whole life, you know, my whole life. I'm in college when I learned about Dad's affairs, you know, his secrets, and my whole life I'd been studying this stuff. To the point that I thought Akhenaten was a household name, but you know, it was quite a ride. It was. So I'm glad you got to see it.
Yeah. Well, I've been a guest on John B. Wells, and so, you know, they give me a free year subscription as a result. And
Right.
So I was able to tune in the show. It was great.
Yes, I try to do that for all the guests that want it as well, and generally give lifetime memberships to the guests. You know. But, you know, we have to do this. We have to do the members thing. We have to, you know, we have to make this financially viable, or else the show won't keep going for 14 years. And this has been the only thing that worked, and it works, and it's easy on everyone, and everybody gets to win. So it's good.
Excellent. Yeah. Good model.
the real point here is to get your work out to the public, to get your thoughts known, to get your passions out there for others to think about. Because when we start to discuss something like 13 pieces of the jigsaw, and we're looking at false flags from the Lusitania up to the Hindenburg, all the way to the Vietnam War, as you've put in here, yes, we can determine there were false flags that brought us into war, but the reason for that is completely left out of this puzzle. So I was really glad that you went ahead, even though it's not your body of work, to start to look into the UFO Nephilim story from L.A. Marzulli, who is also a great guest on this program, and start to really backtrack to where this battle began, as opposed to just looking at, 9/11 was an inside job. We want to know, we've got a Jesuit Pope. We had a Nazi Pope right before him. Religion has been splintered, fractured, marginalized, thrown out under, called anti-science, the battle of creation versus evolution. I know you did a great book on that as well, The Junkyard. And so when we start to look at the puzzle of what we're looking at, what we really see is a battle for history, a battle for owning history. We've got ISIS going out and destroying all of the ancient artifacts that give us clues to what could have happened in this strange past that we have. Because, when you look around at the ancient world, you see technologically advanced civilization there with stone. It's really hard to fathom what was going on way back when, in the ideas of the sons of God and the Nephilim, and how that plays a role in the Vietnam War, right?
Yeah, I primarily have written on geopolitical events and history, and for a long time I had not written anything on UFOs or aliens. It was not actually a strong subject of interest for me, but my viewpoint initially, there was this, in 1967, there was a leaked think tank report. It's the report from Iron Mountain, and this think tank of elites was assigned to determine what the best way to control populations was in the absence of war. And the reason they were doing that in the 60s was that nuclear war was bringing about the possibility that war might not be a practical option anymore. And so is there anything besides war that we could use? And what they finally settled on in that think tank was to use the environmental threat. And so we got all the environmental scares, the ozone hole and the population scare and acid rain, and all that stuff started coming up afterwards. But among the possibilities they discussed was a fake alien invasion. And but they dismissed that because the technology was not good enough, at least at the time. And so I figured, probably these UFOs are just, a black budget Pentagon psyop. I wasn't really that interested, although I was familiar with Serge Mass' prediction of Operation Bluebeam, and I figured they'd bring into play at some point. However, there was this friend of mine who's in the 9/11 Truth Movement who asked me if I'd ever heard of L.A. Marzulli. And I started looking at his work, and he pointed out that many credible witnesses, PhD scientists, have actually had encounters with UFOs and aliens. And then I was in a Bible study where there was a guy who was a very honest guy, engineer, and former Air Force guy, was in the Vietnam War in the Air Force, and during a bombing run, he said that they had a UFO running right beside them. It was right on their radar screen, and finally this thing took off at thousands of miles an hour, which seems to be pretty standard for these objects. And I know that wasn't a Pentagon psyop. And so I had to look more thoroughly at this, and it took me into Genesis 6 in the Bible, where it talks about the Great Flood. And then if you go into that, I don't even know 10 times more about aliens, or 100 times more than I do about aliens. But right before the Bible talks about the flood, it says in Genesis 6, it says, when men began to multiply on the face of the earth and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of men, they were fair, and they took wives of all of them which they chose. There were giants in the earth in those days, and after that, also when the sons of God came into the daughters of men, and they bare children to them, the same became mighty men of old. And for a long time, a lot of Christian theologians said that this was nothing but the sons of God were just godly men. But that idea wasn't introduced until the 5th century. And if you look at the extra biblical books, it becomes so clear. Let's see, for example, oh, I'm sorry. Let me just grab a reference here.
That's fine.
With the book of Jubilee, Jasher, and Enoch, that's where it really comes together. And it says, in Enoch chapter 6 and 7, it says, "And it came to pass when the children of men had multiplied in those days that were born to them beautiful and comely daughters. And the angels, the children of heaven, saw and lusted after them, said to one another, Come, let us choose us wives from among the children of men, and beget children." And it says, moving on, it says, "And they became pregnant, and they bare great giants." And and if you look in the book of Jubilees chapter 5, it says, "It came to pass when the children of men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born to them, the angels of God on a certain year of the Jubilee saw them, that they were beautiful to look upon, and took them as those wives of all they chose, and they bare unto them sons, and they were giants." And then, L.A. Marzulli and other authors have brought this out, that many giants have been dug up by archaeologists, and they're sent to Smithsonian, and the Smithsonian
vanish.
They banished them into the ocean, and there's actually a guy named Richard Dewhurst who wrote a book on the giants of North America, the Great Smithsonian Cover-Up. He's an Emmy Award-winning documentarian, so he's no fool. But it's very clear that there were giants on the earth, and this brought me to a better understanding of the flood. Now, I have written some books on creation versus evolution, and one thing that became very clear to me was that the flood on the earth was actual. I mean, Plato discussed it, and there's been more than 200 cultures that had flood legends, and we're talking about the American Indian tribes and Indians of the Aleutian Islands and the natives of Taiwan. 200 cultures had flood legends, so that can't be a coincidence. There had to be a flood. And also, if you look at geology, 75% of the Earth's geologic layers are sedimentary, that is, chiefly deposited by water. Now, the way the Darwinists try to explain it is that the oceans covered the Earth for eons, and gradually there were sediment deposits. However, that is belied by the fact that you have billions of fossils in the Earth, billions, countless billions. Hardly any fossils get created today, because when an animal dies, whether it's in the ocean or on land, it's before it gets covered by any sediment. It's normally eaten by predators or it just decays. So to be forming a fossil, you have to be buried after death very, very quickly. And the flood of Noah, which I used to dismiss as just a fairy tale for Sunday school children, the flood of Noah would account for that, because the whole earth being covered by water would churn up billions of tons of sediment, kill the creatures, and leave you all those fossils. And so I knew already that before I even started looking into aliens and UFOs, that was true. But what became clear to me is that if you start to look into the background of what was going on at that time, and I had the page ready, but they were actually transhumanizing the world.
Right.
They were, I want to find a quote from the book of Jasher. Wait a minute.
I'll throw one quote in there.
Yeah, you're throwing some stuff while I'm looking for this. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, it's fine. As in the days of Noah, so too as in the days of the coming of the Son of Man. And when you start to look at things and the ancient past, the chimeras, the giants, the bizarreness, the structures, and even digging into the book of Enoch, you definitely find the roots of Hollywood in the Book of
Yeah.
Enoch, with the use of makeup, high heels, gold, and adorning yourself, looking all spiffy. That all came from the Watchers, from the fallen ones in the Book of Enoch. They tell us clearly that this idea of fashion and that we now see promoted generally through Hollywood is straight from the Book of the Fallen and their methodology of just. And if you go to the ancient past, you go to Peru, you go to Egypt, and you look at these, Baalbek, Lebanon, you look at these massive structures that have 33 angles to a stone.
Right.
You need to be a giant, you would have to be a giant to build this.
Yeah, that explains a lot. The giants explain how a lot of these giant structures, which seem inexplicable to us, could have been created by the physical strength of the giants. But what I was looking for was, in terms of transhumanism, was the book of Jasher, chapter 4, verse 18. It says, quote, "The sons of men in those days took from the cattle of the earth, the beasts of the field, and the fowls of the air, and taught the mixture of animals of one species with the other, in order therewith to provoke the Lord. And God saw that the whole earth it was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted the ways upon the earth." And you get this out of the other extra-canonical books as well. So the reason God brought that flood was not to just because an angry dude and he wanted to commit genocide. It was because his whole creation, as he created it, was being corrupted. And basically, the way I put it is, he had to reboot the planet with that flood to start like rebooting your computer. But what's kind of frightening is we see that the same thing is happening today. Not only do we see Satanism being practiced openly, but we see transhumanism. GMOs are part of mixture of species, right? We're tampering with the originals, the original genetic codes for things, changing them. Monsanto's doing that, and Bill Gates is all into that, having GMO seeds. And we have transhumanism with DARPA putting new genes into make super soldiers, and we've got human genes put into pigs and mice, and we've got glow-in-the-dark cats that have jellyfish genes, and we're mixing the species. And that's what God said not to do. So you mentioned end of days earlier. Well, we're kind of heading that way to a point where the Lord might be provoked again. He said he wouldn't bring a flood on the earth again, but we're definitely heading into a critical point of time. And I think you have to be pretty whacked out to think this is really a good thing, but man is tampering with the way things are created.
Yeah, let's realize that these things do not go away, folks. They stay. Okay, so glow-in-the-dark cats give birth to glow-in-the-dark kittens. Those genetic modifications made on one animal continue throughout the entire generations of that animal. We now have Lulu and Nana, the two first genetically modified children, and they have been shown to have cognitive abilities above and beyond normal standards. And again, these will produce furtherly genetically modified children when they have children. So once it's corrupted, like you were saying with Monsanto and their seeds and how they end up taking over the genetics of other plants, and then Monsanto comes to your farm and says, well, I see our gene marker in your wheat field, and they take it. But, not so there we're saying not only is it just the genetically modified things, but then other life forms are corrupted by those genetically modified things, and it doesn't go away. It does not go away. It continues on. So eventually everything will be corrupted.
Right. And you were saying that those genetically modified children had better cognitive abilities. And what it reminds me of a little bit is, I don't know, I don't watch professional sports anymore, but there was an era where some of these athletes were taking steroids, right? And it would make them into better home run hitters. In the long run, those guys got sick. And so when you start messing with the gene pool, you might get, some ability that is new and think, isn't this marvelous? See what we can do with genetic engineering. But in the long run, you're going to disrupt the overall equilibrium, the overall genetic balance of that organism, and eventually can end up with people sick and out of whack.
Without question. It just keeps going, and you can't go back. You can't go back, and then destruction of everything kind of does it. But then the history of all of this is completely lost to most and is being eradicated quicker than we can keep up. So ISIS running around in the Middle East, destroying all the ancient Mesopotamian artifacts that have these chimeras depicted on them, and perhaps even, images of these, of the fallen ones. They are being destroyed. The U.S. military went into the Baghdad Museum and stole particular artifacts that may have given us clues. Now, you moved around through your faith and trying to find a proper church, and I'm intrigued by orthodoxy because everything changes when you start to come to these realizations, and you want to get back to the critical roots of everything. And once you become orthodox, everything in your religion seems to change, including the celebration dates, the method of ritual, the ancient rituals performed. Do you want to talk at all about your transition through Christianity?
Sure. Just with the disclaimer that I'm sort of an Orthodox newbie still. I have been officially in the Orthodox Church as a charismated member for less than 2 years. So I'm not a spokesman, and I might be imprecise or err in something I say, but I grew up in an agnostic home. It was actually sort of a Judeo-Masonic marriage because my father was Jewish and my mother was the son of a Freemason, and she herself in her youth was in the Eastern Star, although she told me she hated it. And I never met my maternal grandfather. He died before I was born.
My mom hated the Eastern Star too.
Oh, okay. And my father, although he's Jewish, just as you didn't know that your family had an occult background for a while, I didn't know my father was Jewish until 1972 when I was little over 20. And I remember this because we went out to see the movie. My roommate and I and my roommate's new girl that he was going with went out to the movie The Candidate with Robert Redford. And that's why I'm positive it's 72. And after the movie, my roommate's girlfriend said, "So Jim, you're Jewish, right?" And I said, "No." And she said, "Oh, come on, now it's nothing to be ashamed of. You're Jewish." And I said, "No, I'm not Jewish." And I had no feelings about Jews, Freeman, at that time. I was really just a dumb kid. And all I knew about Jews was that Hitler had persecuted them during World War II, and they had some kind of role in the Bible, and that was it. So it wasn't like I thought there was a stigma attached to Jews. But I'd never heard that I was Jewish, and so I was denying it just because I thought I wasn't. But she was so insistent that afterwards I said, "Well, why is she saying this?" So I called up my mother and I said, "Mom, are we Jewish?" She said, "Well, your father's Jewish, but he doesn't like to talk about it." And yeah, you're right. He doesn't like to talk about it. He never mentioned it once. Now, he never went to synagogue or we went to church a couple times for social reasons, but he was did not in any way identify with the Jewish faith. But that's when I found out that I was partly Jewish. But in any event, in our home, we had no religion, no acknowledgement of God. And then I got into a New Age cult, whose name I won't mention, but just from 72 to 82. And there was an anti-Christian New Age cult. It was definitely not a Christian cult. But then, with enough time looking at something, you can start to discern, hopefully, if it's true or not. I started to discern a lot of falsehood in this New Age group. And I also noticed a lot of the people were acting kind of like demonic. I mean, even their facial expressions looked demonic, and I started to get freaked out by it. So I got my tail out of there. In the meantime, I read a book, a New Age version of the Bible called the Querying Gospel of Jesus the Christ. And I started feeling very attracted to Christianity. And one other thing that drew me towards Christianity, believe it or not, was geopolitics. And what I mean by that is that I read in 1978 Gary Allen's book, None Call a Conspiracy, which opened my eyes for the first time to the pattern of history and what was driving it. And I saw that it was Christians who were opposed to this. And that, for me, that, although I'd been ridiculing Christianity early in my life, I now said, let's score some points for the Christians if they're against this New World Order agenda. So I started investigating more, and I started being drawn towards Christianity. And so for about over 30 years, I attended evangelical types of churches. I mean, in America, I thought, well, we've got a choice between the Vatican, but that's really corrupt. And on the Protestant side of the aisle, you've got a choice between the modernist churches, which are really watered down. We could go into that, but that's the Rockefellers doing with the Union Theological Seminary and, paying, granting money to churches in exchange for watering down the doctrine, stuff like that. But so I mostly attended evangelical churches, which were at least on top of gay marriage is not a good thing and abortion is bad. And, they were conservative in their outlook. And I was, after my hippie years, my new age years, I had become a conservative. So I felt most comfortable in that church environment. However, as I continued in those churches, I started hearing a lot of, especially since 9/11, a lot of pro-war talk. Every Veterans Day and every 4th of July and every Memorial Day, there'd be a big sermon on how just our wars were, and if you see a vet, thank him because he's defending your freedoms. And one 4th of July sermon, I hated to do this, but the pastor opened by saying 8 consecutive things about America that I knew as a alt media historian were not true. And I was building up rage inside. I left my son inside the church, and I just walked out the front door and slammed it and waited in the car for the service to be over. I said, I can't take this. And it started overflowing from the holidays, the military holidays, to the other days as well. And on top of that, though, Freeman, I started hearing a lot of things that were theologically not true, how we're going to return to a Jewish era, for example, and we're going to go back to animal sacrifices. And I said, no, wait a minute. The Bible's clear on that in the book of Hebrews that Jesus on the cross did away with the daily sacrifice. We're not to go back to that. But I started hearing a lot of things that were really weirded out, and I realized that when it was an assistant pastor talking, it held up a Schofield Reference Bible, I knew it was coming from. And since then I've written a lot on Christian Zionism, and that's actually a chapter in my new book, Truth with Lonely Warrior. I'm sorry, 13 pieces of the jigsaw. It's called The Abomination of Christian Zionism. I go into a little history of Christian Zionism in the Schofield Reference Bible. But I was kind of at a loss because I said, well, I don't want to become Catholic. And that was all this going on in the Vatican. And I said, I can't go to a monarchist church. And I found that most of the evangelical churches shared this dispensational, pro-Zionist, pro-war attitude that I knew was false. So theologically, these guys were not on the money, and politically, they were really missing out. And by the way, I want to mention that Pastor Chuck Baldwin has recently abandoned this type of theology. He is very hard on Israel now and on Christian Zionism. It's great to see. He's a former presidential candidate and a very major voice in the Christian world. But in any event, on my own, I'm mentioning great major figures in the Christian movement. Hank Hanegraaff, the Bible Answer Man, who I used to listen to on the radio back in the 90s, one of the most respected figures in the evangelical world, has become Orthodox now. Well, anyway, I started listening to Brother Nathaniel Kapner, who's a Jew who converted to Eastern Orthodoxy, and I was invited on a show by a guy named Dean Arnold, a podcast host who is also a convert to Orthodox. And I heard a conversation between him before one of the a show he did with Jay Dyer, who's also a convert to Orthodoxy. And I started looking at Orthodoxy, and I realized that the Orthodox, they split with the Catholics in 1054 AD, and that was kind of the last we heard of them in the West, because from that point forward, the West only got the Vatican's point of view. The big split, the main reason for the split, there's more than one reason, but the main reason was that the Pope wanted to become the exclusive spokesman for Christianity, whereas up for the first 1,000 years of Christianity, well, or at least I should say after it was legalized from the 300s on, whenever there was a dispute, it would always be resolved by an ecumenical council of all the Christian churches coming together. All the patriarchs would come together. But then the Patriarch of Rome said, "No, I'm the only one who can make a decision." And it's true that he always held the highest place of honor at these councils, but never was he the sole vote. But he wanted to become the only vote giver, and that was unacceptable in the East. And so he split up. The two sides split, and then we only saw Christianity in the West through the Vatican, which, with one guy at the helm, corrupted over the years. And then finally Martin Luther came along 500 years later and said, "Hey, the Vatican's corrupt." And so he split off, and he had good reasons, but the problem was that then everybody started to split. Everybody who wanted to start their own church said, "I'm going to start my own church." And, King Henry VIII started the Anglican church because the Pope wouldn't get him a divorce. And, I found that churches I was attending were basically be a spinoff of a spinoff of a spinoff of a spinoff. And you know what? I said, I'm learning more and more that it's better to go back to the ancient traditions. And I found that the Eastern Orthodox Church still worships the way they did in the 4th century. They still use the liturgy of St. John Chrysostom from the 300s. And, not to say that they haven't had their own problems, but another thing was that they are the most persecuted church in history, and all the branches of Christianity have been persecuted. But if you look at the Bolshevik Revolution, where 60 million were killed, or the Ukrainian genocide, or the Armenian genocide, those were Occidental Orthodox Christians. But it's usually the Orthodox that really get it hard, and Satan knows who his worst enemies are. And so I started looking, and I said, wow. Another thing was that they even used the Septuagint. Because when I was in evangelical churches, now the Septuagint is the Old Testament, right? So the Septuagint was the Greek version of the Old Testament that was created at the request of Ptolemy in 132 BC. And I noticed one thing, which is, and when I attended evangelical churches, when you'd read the Bible, when it would quote the Old Testament, when you turn to the Old Testament, it said something different than what Jesus and the apostles were quoting from the Old Testament. I said, why is that? And the reason was that they were quoting Septuagint. But what happened is in 1000 AD, 1,000 years after Christ, the rabbis introduced the Masoretic Old Testament. And all the Christian churches started using that. And that's what you see in the King James and your modern Bibles. But the Orthodox, they still use it. Still use the Septuagint. And I said, these guys are doing a lot of things right. Not to say that it's, it's imperfect, but it's been the most attacked church. It still worships the way the original church does, and that's what I wanted to do. And there are other reasons, but I'll kind of stop there because I've been talking for a long time. But as so often happens, to find out the way to do things, you go back to the original. Actually, I can go into a Hollywood movie about that, but I'll stop there and throw it back to you.
Oh, well, I don't mind. Yeah, I mean, there is a chapter in 13 Pieces of the Jigsaw about the Hollywood anti-Semitism and, how much this has influenced everything. If we look at movies right now, and we got like Brightburn coming up, which was basically a Superman story if Superman was evil. Yeah. So, when you look at the Superman story right from the beginning, Kal-El and his Hebrew name, and Jor-El, his father, who Barack Obama claimed was his father, you get this story of what would appear to be a Nephilim, a superhuman that came down from another planet and has, no one can defeat it. Nobody can do anything. And so imagine if Superman was evil. Well, that's the new movie, Brightburn.
Great.
We have Dark Phoenix coming out of the X-Men scenario. And again, there we are with these transhumanist or mutated humans. And then the Dark Phoenix, as these dark heroes keep rising to the surface. Lost my headset there. Good Omens is another one coming up, and it's just endless about the end time programming that's coming out. But then, like the Avengers Endgame, I mean, that's pretty clear. And in that one, the lead villain really could be read as the hero, but his hero status is to kill all humans, save the planet. And this has been programmed in over and over again. So yeah, I mean, if you just start looking around, because this is what's so important, like 13 Pieces of the Jigsaw and Truth is the Lonely Warrior, these two books outline these false flag movement towards this radical new world order and the new sense of mankind that's supposed to be taken on. We have the Bilderberg meeting going on right now. You got to wonder, what they got scheduled for us. And even Kissinger is there. I mean, when is this guy ever going to die?
Something, he attended the 1957 Bilderberg conference. Can you believe it?
Wow.
62 years ago, he was attending Bilderberg, and the guy is still going. He's still attending Bilderberg after 62 years. Amazing. I was 6 years old when he went to Bilderberg.
Right.
Incredible.
That is too much. It's weird to sit here and know that people are in this to plan our future, and we see the destruction that's coming. So, that's why I brought up the orthodoxy, was the idea of getting back to the roots, because what we got now with the Vatican, Freemasonic, Islamic battle, it really is to distort all of history and rewrite it into a way that fits into their theme. If you were to go to the in Astana in Kazakhstan, there they have the Council of Religions, and it's housed inside of a giant pyramid, and then they have this big sundial table that they all sit around. Well, if you look at the Council on Religion, the majority of them are Islamic. And so it doesn't seem like there's a whole lot of Christianity being represented in this new world order, and especially not from the original standpoint of understanding.
Yeah, they're actually favoring Islam right now, but I don't think that it's the Islamicists who are running the show.
No.
Right now, as you know, Europe is in trouble. They're being overrun by these migrants. Some of them, I guess, are Wahhabis. We're seeing Christian architecture being burned down, Christian churches being burned down.
But it's never terrorism. It's always just, arson, or, they never, when it's a Christian cathedral, there's no news mainstream like, oh my God, they're killing the Christians. It's always, well, there was a fire,
Well, there's a couple ways that I could go with this, but one thing is, didn't I see you do a show with Tex Morrison?
Oh yeah, Tex and I go way back. I made 3 of his films.
Fantastic.
Yeah, we had some amazing coincidences, Tex and I, and kept I was making a film on hand signs and gestures of the Illuminati, and I had this whole 2-hour film made. And then I come across Tex's work of Codex Magica, which I had no idea about. So we both were laying down this piece of the puzzle at the exact same time. So we invite, somebody told me about it. They were like, hey, you got to get Tex Morrison on here. And so I already had this 2-hour film set up for Tex that blew his mind, because he thought, he was the only one really digging this out. And so we ended up making our first film together, Codex Magica. And so my television show of his book, which I actually had more, I was showing him stuff. And that book is comprehensive. So there was even more, because I was deep into the different Freemasonic signs and symbols that you would see on things like Seinfeld. They were constantly showing Masonic hand signs and stuff on Seinfeld. And so he was totally blown away, and I became really close with their whole collective and would show up at times. And one other occurrence that I thought was really fantastic, I had just finished my Anna Nicole expose, the whole mind control expose, and this really freaked me out. Like, I mean, people don't realize that I was at the forefront of this story of Hollywood mind control. No one was talking about high-profile rituals or anything like that until I started pointing the stuff out. And it freaked me out so bad that I had to run away. I was so scared for my life that I just got in my car and drove to my mommy. And I didn't even have enough money to get to where I was going. I didn't care. I just left. And I made my way because that's how I do. And I got to where I was going, got to visit mom and, you know, sit back and just chill for a minute and try to become less pale and less freaked out. But along the way, I was visiting all of these bizarre structures like the pyramids in America and things of that nature. And when I came back, I had all those pictures in my camera. Tex calls me and says, hey, can you come over and help me edit? And he's working on his monuments, Mysterious Monuments book. And he's working on the film for that. Well, it just so happened that I had visited every place that he was talking about, and I had the photographs to go with it.
Wow.
So I ended up being photographer, editor, and partially in the film with Mysterious Monuments. So, yeah, Tex and I have had a really interesting side-by-side run, unknowing of one another, and then, you know, became co-workers.
Yeah, well, you know, you were talking earlier about destruction of ISIS of certain things that remind people of the past. And you know, Tex, one of his books, I believe it was 2 years ago, was called Hell's Mirror, and he was talking about how all this satanic architecture that's going up, as if to greet Satan or the Antichrist or whatever the satanic culture is going to be called. And I realized as I saw the Cathedral of Notre Dame's spire coming down, it made sense to me that if you're going to build satanic architecture, at the same time you're going to be getting rid of the Christian architecture in preparation for that day. And you know, I believe, by the way, that's probably going to, we were talking about fallen angels and Nephilim. I think that Hollywood's been leading us up for their return. The one thing I thought was fascinating from reading these extra biblical texts, which are, by the way, they're referenced in the Bible. Jubilees and Jasher are mentioned in the Bible, and the Book of Enoch is quoted in the Bible, even though they are not part of the canon. Although the Book of Enoch is part of the canon of the Ethiopians. Let's see if I can find this. Oh yes, that's what I'm looking for. And Enoch spreads light on the difference between fallen angels and demons. You know, I had not really realized this, but it's the Book of Enoch, chapter 15 says this: but now the giants who are born of the union of the spirits and the flesh shall be called evil spirits on the earth, because their dwelling shall be in the earth and inside the earth. Evil spirits that come out of their bodies, because from that day they were created from the sons of God to become watchers. And L.A. Marzulli talks about how the demons in fallen angels, the demons are subordinate to the fallen angels, and as you expect if you read this history. And he actually thinks that the demons are these ETs, you know, these little ETs, that, you know, like you see in the movie ET, that they're quite different from these reptilian types which appear to be actually the fallen angels. They're much more powerful, but the ETs are apparently, L.A. Marzulli is telling us that they're these spirits, the demons that have actually gotten to have created some kind of biological bodysuit for them. But it starts to become clear when you look at this. But in any event, what I was going to with Hollywood was that I feel that the return of the Nephilim and the fallen angels is being prepped for by these movies, which, by the way, I don't keep up with anymore. As I was saying before we started the show, I don't keep up with Hollywood anymore. It just turns me off. But all these movies about aliens seem to be preparing us for a day that the fallen angels will come back, and they will probably not tell us that they're fallen angels. Instead, they'll say that we've come from a civilization far, far away, and it's a more advanced civilization. And the Book of Enoch makes it very clear that they had high technology. We were talking about some of that earlier in the show. So people were very impressed by that technology, of course, and think, oh, these people are from another world and they've come here from another galaxy, to enhance us. But the Nephilim are interesting. According to the Bible, these were the mighty men, and you can see it in even outside the Bible in Greek mythology when it talks about Hercules. He was a very big, strong man, but he was the result of a union between a woman and a celestial being. And it's very clear that's a retelling of what the Bible says about the Nephilim being created by angels mating with people. But you were mentioning transhumanism, and you see that these superheroes, I feel like, well, the aliens in the movies are the fallen angels. That they may be preparing us for return of the Nephilim, and these superheroes, the giant Hulk and Spider-Man. I keep up with him, but I remember Spider-Man. He was built of a spider bite, so he was transhumanized. His DNA became part spider DNA, and so you've got Hollywood bringing us possibly to an end of days where these fallen angels will return with their Nephilim, which was seen in Hollywood as aliens and superheroes. I may be wrong about that, but
I promise you, if you watch Avengers,
yeah, it sure looks that way. Again, I have not seen that new Avengers. I'm joking with you offhand. The last time I saw the Avengers was with Diana Rigg in the '60s.
right?
I mean, I go back. I was entertained by it back then, and now I just stay away from it. But as I mentioned, I do appreciate people's analysis of what's going on in these movies and how there's predictive programming taking place.
Yeah, I mean, if we start looking at things like this, and I had brought up this new, it was new to me, a Netflix series called Altered Carbon, right? So altering carbon-based life forms, and it was transhumanist. You're able to transfer the souls of dead people into live people, so that they could your old folks could show up for the Christmas holidays and such, but they would show up in some prisoner's body with tattoos. The woman might be a man. You never knew what body you were going to actually be brought into, and then you get to hang out with your family for Christmas, and then go back into your little computer until they brought you back again. And I had compared this with Arnold Schwarzenegger in the film The Sixth Day, which was one of the early films on mind transfer technologies into human clones for immortality. And then I realized, without knowing, as I was talking about both these films, that they were both produced by the same production company. And this is a production company that I have followed since they put out. I had this surprising moment in the theater. I had just got into corporate logos and their occult meanings and the Freemasonic history of these corporate logos. And all of a sudden, I see this big gold compass, square, and G on the screen in front of me for a preview. Why can I not think of the name of the movie? I didn't intend on bringing that one into this, but it popped into my head because that was the moment I was like, oh my God, they're not even hiding it anymore. And it was the film by Alan Moore about how Jack the Ripper was a Freemason and therefore was never prosecuted. And but so all of these movies, The Sixth Day, the one that I can't think of the name of, and Altered Carbon, were all produced by the exact same company, which was Phoenix Pictures. And of course, the Phoenix plays a heavy role in this whole burning down and rising back again. And that's why we have Dark Phoenix coming from the X-Files series. The corporate logo for Phoenix Pictures is a friction match struck, and then it burns into the fiery phoenix and says Phoenix Pictures. Well, if you were to go, folks, and look Lucifer up in the dictionary, the very first thing you're going to see is the definition is friction match. So if you have some idea of that, then you know that they're clearly saying Lucifer Pictures. I mean, it's right there, boldly in front of your face. And then if you were to go and dig into satanic works, which not too many, even the Christians that are researching, don't want to go and dig into Crowley or into Kenneth Grant and actually read the works of these Satanists. Now, when I say Satanist, I always mean those that clarify themselves as Satanists. I don't use it as a derogatory term, sometimes, but not generally. I call the elite baby eaters.
Mhm.
I have forever. That's the best term. I don't call them Illuminati. I don't call them any of that. I call them baby eaters. And it seems that I was correct, if we are going to believe Isaac Cappy's story. But where was I going? Oh, if you actually dig into these satanic works, then you will find that the satanic mark of the beast, according to Satanists, is the O and the X. That very symbol that you see on the X-Files, that you see on the X-Men, that shows up all over on your Xbox over and over again. But very, very, very few people know that the X-Men logo is the mark of the beast, according to Satanists. And that was something I came across and was just like, oh my God, this explains so much. And now you can clearly see it as the satanic agenda, especially coming out of America, is coming full board. And yes, just like you were showing in 13 Pieces of the Jigsaw with Gentleman's Agreement, go back to that boring ass movie and realize why it got an Academy Award, and then recognize why the movies are as they are today. It's over, it's a continual rise in this story. And one other thing that popped in my head while you were talking of the demonic and even demonic possession, or just these demons running around in human man suits, is the guy who lit himself on fire at the White House. Because Gupta is his name, Arvind Gupta. And the story's mysterious already. The dude leaves his house at 9 a.m. and somehow has a missing persons report put out for him, I think by his wife. Well, one, they just don't put out missing person report if you're gone for an hour or two, right? It just doesn't happen. But the news is saying there was a missing person report for this guy. He was only missing for 3 hours. He left the house around 9:30 a.m. By 12:30 p.m., he is lighting himself in front of the White House. And he just strolls across the lawn, lit on fire, no reaction, no nothing. I mean, it looks like a stunt, man. Most of them say that the fire looks unusual because of its really orangey red color. It looks more like a stunt man had lit himself on fire. The guy didn't die until he got to the hospital, according to reports. But then TMZ is saying that it's because he was smoking the synthetic marijuana known as K2. And I'll tell you, this K2 thing has been another thing that keeps coming up as, well, for one thing, in DC, weed is medicinally legal. If the guy was a smoker, he could go get his meds, legally or very easily in DC. You can, it's legal there. It's not recreational, I think, yet, but, it's still legal. So you wouldn't be smoking K2. That's what I'm thinking. If you're actually a cannabis user and you're in a legal state, go get your medical card. But so they say this guy's on K2. Now, there's been a number of K2 reports, and I'm just going to throw these out here just because. One of the ones that really stood out was when I started reporting on zombie attacks. Now, I did not think I would ever be covering zombie attacks for real. And then suddenly there was this whole rash of people eating other people. And the one that really stood out to me was a story, and I think it was in Florida. It's always in Florida. This man smokes K2, according to the story, and then starts acting like a wild beast in his house, starts chasing his family around on all fours, and then eats the family dog. And these were straight news stories. There were a number of zombie stories that came out of people eating other people at this point. I don't know what to think about that, James, but, these are the thoughts that come as we look at our strange, strange world.
Yeah, I've been meaning to look into it more, but a friend of mine who's awake tells me that there are these forms of marijuana that are many times stronger than the type of marijuana people smoked when I was hippie. I never liked marijuana. I tried it a couple of times and made me feel sick, so I never got into that. But I understand that there are very dangerous forms of marijuana, which it's not just, I know a lot of people think that they're sticking it to the man by smoking marijuana, but I know that CNN had a special promoting marijuana. It must have run for about 2 hours, and it was all about the benefits of marijuana. I said, if the mainstream is pushing it, there's an agenda behind it. It's not, some rebellion by, grassroots against the establishment that's behind this marijuana movement. There's something else to it.
I'd much rather you smoking marijuana than K2 and eating your family dog. That's for sure. K2 isn't even cannabis. It's just synthetic created. But yeah, as they start to get this all set up and they've got their genetically modified cannabis coming, then I have I'm not surprised that it's going to start reaching. But here we are. I mean, I don't know. Is this going to be taken wrongly? But here we are right now in Gay Pride Month and, legal homosexual marriage and all of that. And they can't give kids weed. I mean, really? To me, this is kind of a weird thing. I do blame reefer madness for all of this madness. Mm-hmm. But, anyone that knows that cannabis is way subtler than drinking, than alcohol.
Right, and not nearly as addictive.
Far less problems. Yeah, exactly.
When I was 20 and people were smoking marijuana, they didn't talk about the health benefits of cannabis, but there is evidence certainly that hemp and cannabis oil can be very healthy for people.
Yeah, and of course, a lot of the cannabis activists use the Bible, saying that God gave us use of all these things. And anyway, that was a bit of a side jog in this whole situation. But that, just seeing that guy walk around and they said he looked like he was hallucinating. I would say he looked possessed. It was pretty bizarre to just have this going on. But here we are. In our new world, we have killer robots. Skynet was just launched by SpaceX, which, of course, they're calling it Starlink. But they just tripled the amount of satellites orbiting our planet with the single launch, with the launch of Starlink, which is expected to be more. This is just the first launch of Skynet. I'm going to call it Skynet instead of Starlink so people can see it as what it really is. As they start to spread 5G across the planet. And I know that you had a great interview that you transcribed into this book as well on the 5G scenario. And I want to just throw this out here, that any of this type of frequency modulation from HAARP. Now, if we go back to the beginning of the High Frequency Active Auroral Research Program, which is HAARP, and the use of an antenna array to transmit ultra-low frequencies that penetrate everything, go straight through mountains, they're killing whales. It's a very destructive wave that's completely invisible. I go back to Isaac Bonowitz and his book, Real Magic. And in 1970s, he had written a book that described HAARP before HAARP or Sura or any of the ionospheric heaters were created. He was describing it as a magical psychic machine. And he had laid out all the necessary means and got a degree from Berkeley in magic using this very theory of a psychic machine. And so the very first telling I have of an ionospheric heater of HAARP and this type of transmission of ultra-low frequency waves was through a magic book, which was a thesis that proved magic and got the guy a degree in magic. Of course, Isaac did show up on the Freeman Perspective. I did get him on my show before he died, but I could not get him to talk about the HAARP chapter. He was like, "Oh, I don't remember." And I'm like, "Are you covering this up or you really don't remember?" I mean, I realize it was a long time ago, but come on. And so in the whole show I had with Isaac, I could not get him to get into this. But what I wanted to get into in this idea is our emotional body. and how we're seeing everybody freaking out right now. I mean, especially like if you're going to walk around in a MAGA hat around leftists, you know, you're going to get beat. And what I realized is we could be completely agitated by all of these 5G frequencies and, you know, our routers and then now Starlink and all the satellites beaming this down, plus the ionospheric heaters orbiting, you know, surrounding the globe. And what I know about humans is that we will attach something to our feelings. So if, like me, I feel anxious a lot of the time, and I really do believe that this is due to these frequencies because I have nothing in my life that really should cause the heightened anxiety that I feel. But when I talk to people, they always find a reason, you know, like, oh, well, you know, my life sucks at this moment, so I feel this way, you know? But my life doesn't suck right now, so I don't have an excuse for my anxiety. So I'm looking outward and wondering if this is... And so I'm bringing this to the surface right now to see if there's a bunch of people in the audience that are going, wait a minute, I'm feeling the same high anxiety, but I've always attributed it to my job or my relationship or whatever was going wrong at that moment, because we feel the feelings and then we attach the reasons. And well, maybe 5G is the reason.
One thing that's collateral to this is, you know, in my own case, you know, I was semi-autistic when I was a child and teenager, and this was due to vaccinations. I had severe reactions to DPT shots in my infancy, which involved fevers and skin rash and who knows what was going on inside, but the doctor said it was eczema. That's the label they put on it. And I stopped getting the DPT shots and eczema went away, but then when they gave me a DPT booster in second grade, I got high fever and skin rash, and everybody said, oh, well, that's a reaction to the vaccine. They recognized it at that point, but nobody put two and two together and realized I'd been impacted by those infant DPT shots. And there's a long story to that. For over 2 decades, I had a purple welt on the side of my neck, and I asked my mother what's that from. She said, oh, that's after you got your vaccination. My body was just walling off the poisons. It wasn't until I detoxed that I was able to get away from a lot of that. But the point being that when we talk about people's emotions, sometimes there's a chemical component, you know, and I know that in a narrow evangelical perspective, they just call that sin. But the fact of the matter is we're being impacted in ways that sometimes go beyond just willful sin. It's, where, in my case, I was impacted by chemicals, but in the case of, you were mentioning 5G, we have plenty of evidence, some of which I've outlined in that interview in my book, with the interview with Cece Doucette, who's a full-time wireless educator, that these wireless technologies are causing all kinds of troubles. Physically, they're causing cancer. You know, I'm a registered nurse myself, and I took care of a young man who had a brain tumor on the right side of his head. Well, he used to always hold his cell phone right there. And Ted Kennedy is from my state. He got a brain tumor on the right side of his head. He used to hold his cell phone right there. John McCain got brain tumors on the left side of his head because he's left-handed. He used to hold his cell phone right there. This lowered sperm counts and DNA damage and all kinds of physical damage, which is it's recognized in places like India and increasingly in the EU, that France, when they let kids bring cell phones to school because they realize that there's a danger. But we seem to think that if any products on the market here in America must be safe. Well, I believe that a lot of our emotional problems probably are coming from these frequencies, these Wi-Fi frequencies. My home, I've hardwired it as much as I can. I don't use Wi-Fi. And that's one thing Cece Doucette, who I interviewed in this chapter on wireless, recommends is, you know, hardwire your home and buy an acoustimeter and check out where dangerous levels of EMF radiation may be coming from. But it's not just the physical problems and illnesses, but it's also the emotional problems. And I would certainly agree that many emotional outbursts and other things we go through are probably from being inundated with electromagnetic radiation. It's not just the cell phone towers, but it's a two-edged sword because we have people carrying smartphones which have multiple transmitters in them. Transmitter for Bluetooth, transmitter for your location, etc. Email and so forth. In the movie Generation Zap, they have an interview with an Asian woman who got breast cancer. She used to carry a cell phone in her bra, and she had a tumor that was you could correlate with each of the transmitters in this smartphone she was carrying in her bra. There's no question that we're being impacted physically and emotionally by these things, but 5G looks very dangerous. It's one report I saw said that it's 25 times stronger than Wi-Fi. There's no safety testing whatsoever done on 5G. If you go onto YouTube, you can see an interview, well, not an interview, but it's a congressional session where Senator Richard Blumenthal of Connecticut asked these representatives of the people from Verizon, that whole sector of the tech industry, has any safety testing been done on 5G? And they just sit there with smirks on their faces. They have no answer for them because there has been no safety testing that's been done on 5G. In fact, the only safety testing that's been done on wireless at all was back in the 1990s when it was 2G, and they took a mannequin and put gel in its head, and they found they turned up the electromagnetic frequency as long as it didn't melt the gel or cause a change in the heat of the gel. It was safe to use, and the FCC has totally ignored all of the studies that have come out. We're talking about thousands of studies at this point, peer-reviewed studies, and we're not just talking about guys on a Twitter feed. We're talking about scientific peer-reviewed studies that have shown that these are very, very dangerous. In fact, U.S. Government Accountability Office in 2012 instructed the FCC to, quote, formally reassess the current RF energy exposure limit, including its effects on human health, unquote. And yet, despite thousands of these studies, the FCC has still not responded to that communication from the General Accountability Office. So we're looking at a serious endgame, Freeman, with 5G. They're putting up 20,000 satellites to implement it, and they're going to have cell phone towers, which are currently limited. I think it's a mile or a mile and a half from a person's home. Now they're going to have cell phone towers right outside your home, right outside your window. You'll have a personal cell phone tower, and they've got these military grade microwaves. Who knows? At the very least, they're setting up a total surveillance state. But worse than that, they may be trying to control our thoughts, which is something that Sergeant Manasse, when he talked about Project Bluebeam before he died of an alleged heart attack, he talked about how they're going to use EMFs, electromagnetic frequencies, to control our thoughts. And that would be a great end game for Satan, to have a world where nobody could even oppose him because we weren't capable of even thinking thoughts against the New World Order. You'd be thinking, I love Big Brother, instead, how can I fight against the state? You wouldn't even know how to reach for that 38 caliber handgun you have stowed away to defend yourself because you can't even think a thought. But another thing might be that they're going to increase these frequencies to the level that they could kill people. I really don't know what the true end game of 5G is. But when I look at people starving in Yemen and the water supply in Flint and our degraded roads, you tell me they got billions of dollars for this high tech stuff so we can have faster downloads? Give me a break,
Right.
I'm hardwired, right? And I downloaded a movie a few weeks ago. It was an old movie that my father took me to see when I was a child. It's an enjoyable movie. It's called Our Man from Havana with Alec Guinness. It's a well-done movie. I downloaded it, and it took 1 second. So you're trying to tell me that we need faster download speeds? No, we don't. There's another agenda behind 5G. That it's a long-term agenda, and it looks like either mind control or death, most probably. I have targeted death. A nuclear weapon would wipe out a whole population, including their friends, the New World Order's friends, but this way you can target an individual household for destruction or killing its members. I don't know what the true end game is with 5G. All I know is it's not humanitarian.
Without a doubt. And we're going to dig into this a little deeper, folks, on the other side, but we got to wrap this one up. We've gone well over our hour here, James. So I want to make sure, because we'll be coming right back into the members section, get more into Bluebeam and demonic possession. But obviously, I picked the the stranger chapters out of 13 pieces of the jigsaw, because I'm attracted to such oddities. But this book is something that you need them both. Truth is a Lonely Warrior, along with 13 pieces of the jigsaw, to really dig deep into the historical narrative that is guiding to this state, because it lays out these layers, and you start to understand why would we need these false flags? Why would we want to be led into world wars? And then why would we want an extended campaign like Vietnam, and what that has done to the mental to how people see the world, and how we have altered our whole nation's ideals through these things. So 13 pieces of the jigsaw by James Perloff, guys. You want to check it out. Of course, the link is right below. And Truth is a Lonely Warrior, of course, is there as well. Do you want to tell everybody how to get a hold of you, James, as we sign out of this first hour?
Sure. They can go to my website, jamesperloff.com. That's Perloff, and just hit the contact on the menu. And there's a email form. They can send me an email. Probably the best way to communicate.
Nice. So guys, do it. Get out there, check this stuff out. And we're going to get deeper into this now in the second hour. So if you're not yet a member, come on over to freemantv.com, because I know you're listening elsewhere, and subscribe. It helps support the show. You just jump in, $8 a month, no big deal. And you get years and years and years of back catalog that you can go through. And if you don't become a member, still come over to freemantv.com, because there are 14 years of free work there for you that you could start at the beginning. I highly recommend starting with the Freeman perspective, going back to the original TV show with Isaac Bonowitz and Tex Mars and all of the craziness that I have covered throughout these years. So just dig around freemantv.com, click the watch, and just start going. Just let it play, and boy, oh boy, will you be filled and inundated with information. So thank you all for tuning in. And I guess I should say this. The last show was not an AI. The weird recording where my voice was slowed down, I was not taken over by AI, although the audio is, because the audio goes through the cloud. And when it came back to me, it was altered in that way. But I love all the conspiracy theories that surround just the new formation of my voice. I'm all for a good conspiracy theory, but let's not get too paranoid. I am still me. I promise you that. Hopefully this audio is sounding okay. I can't tell until the show is over. So thank you all again, and we will see you next week.